Hey everybody, CVH here, and today I'm super excited because I can finally bring you guys my preview card for the upcoming Fall of the Dark Brotherhood expansion for Elder Scrolls Legends. This is really quickly approaching, guys. April 5th is the release date, so if you guys haven't pre-ordered the set already, I strongly encourage you to do so. But yeah, people have been waiting for whatever card I was going to preview for a long time. I sort of teased out some of the art on Twitter and on Twitch yesterday, so, speculations are all over the place, and I'm finally able to bring you this. Boom. Little girl. So, a 4-drop 0/2 in Endurance, it's a vampire, and at the start of your turn, Little Girl changes into a 5/5 Ageless vampire with Drain. So obviously we have to see the card it changes into. Let's take a look at the Ageless vampire itself. There we go, clearly Little Girl has changed into a 5-drop 5/5 Ageless vampire with Drain. Also, I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who guessed on the video that this was going to be Babette from Skyrim. The concept is indeed based on Babette from Skyrim, which is the word I got. So the first thing we need to note is that I'm only spoiling one card today. Ageless Vampire is just basically a token that's generated from the Little Girl. I clarified this just to make entirely sure. Ageless Vampire is not a collectible card in the Fall of the Dark Brotherhood. It simply comes off of Little Girl's effect. So let's talk a little bit more about change. Obviously, change is in bold on the card, as you can see, which means it is yet another new ability word like Slay coming out in this set. So it has some similarities to transform, which you might see on a card like Mummify, which transforms any creature into a 2/2 mummy, but there are some notable differences I was made aware of. So in a change keyword type of situation like Little Girl, Ageless Vampire, the changed creature retains all modifications and states on the original card. So this means a couple things. For starters, if you play an item on the Little Girl, that item will then remain on the Ageless Vampire when it comes out. It also means that the Ageless Vampire, or any creature that is changed into, can attack on the turn it comes to the board. So you play the Little Girl on one turn, and it survives, and at the start of your next turn, you get a 5/5 Ageless Vampire with Drain that can attack on that following turn. Of course, there's a possibility of it getting shackled. If the Little Girl gets shackled, that shackle will also remain on the Ageless Vampire because it is a state of the card. And that's pretty much all there is to know about change. It's a fairly simple ability word that we're seeing introduced. Very cool implications for the future of design space. But yeah, all that's left to do, I believe, is to talk about some playability speculations about Little Girl Ageless Vampire. Obviously, I'm not in love with the stat line. It's a 4-drop 0/2, but it makes sense. Obviously, there's quite the payoff if this card is played and happens to survive until the next turn. Having a 5/5 with Drain that can immediately attack is pretty much universally backbreaking, I would say, because it totally frees up your turn 5. You're basically spending your entire turn 4, however, and that is an issue, because Little Girl, while it does technically demand an immediate answer, that answer is unlikely to be taking up a lot of your opponent's time. This card will die to Firebolt, it'll die to Execute. Unfortunately, silences are very effective against the card as well. However, if they, blank on an answer for one turn, all of a sudden the Ageless Vampire comes out and your opponent's going to have a huge problem, or like a 5/5 of problem. I don't know if that's necessarily huge for a lot of decks, but it will require significantly more to answer. So obviously, this card doesn't seem very good against control decks, which are, stock full of answers. Against midrange, it might be too risky to play it, especially against a lot of them that currently run cards like Earthbone Spinner, Firebolt, etc., in decks like the midrange Archer and midrange Sorcerer. I do think this card has some pretty neat implications. I wish you could guarantee that it was going to be seeing these implications in a lot of matchups, but for like an aggro matchup, for example, let's say you're playing against aggro Battle Mage, obviously a very fast deck, runs Earthbone Spinners and maybe some other removal, but typically doesn't run a card like Firebolt. It's more concerned with dealing damage to the opponent's face than dealing efficient damage to creatures. So if you were to say, play a couple things early to stave off the early aggression on turn 3 or 4, or we can with the Ring of Magicka on turn 3, obviously, you play a Little Girl in the Shadow Lane. Your opponent can't attack it, obviously, and they don't really run cards like Firebolt usually, so unless they dedicate an entire Lightning Bolt or Earthbone Spinner to it, then you would get this 5/5 with Drain that could immediately start punching, draining, maybe killing things. That would be incredibly difficult for an aggro deck to deal with, and it doesn't seem like they'd have the most answers to the Little Girl. So that's the situation where in Constructed I think this could deal the most damage. Obviously you can't really guarantee that you're going to be playing against that specific matchup too much, so it might not be worth a lot of deck slots in the first place. However, I do think, due to the nature of being good against aggressive decks that maybe don't have the most efficient removal, immediately the bells are ringing in my head saying, well, in Arena, People are generally playing aggressive decks. Drain is a very, very powerful keyword, and people generally don't have the greatest removal options. Obviously, we've all had those drafts where you get 5 fire bolts and 3 lightning bolts, but that's definitely not the norm. You see a lot of blue decks that just don't have access to either of them. So even in matchups that are traditionally maybe bad for the little girl, you see it becoming more reliable. Obviously, you still do sacrifice some tempo on turn 4 or turn 3 if you Ring of Magicka it out, but that could easily be made up for if this 5/5 is able to start coming out, start attacking on turn 5. A 5/5 in Arena is exponentially larger than it would be considered in Constructed, just due to the the limited amount of threats most of the decks have. So yeah, I definitely think I could see picking this card in Arena over a couple things. It remains to be tested. It's very interesting. I think we might be seeing more changes in the future. I really hope we do, at least. I don't know if anything else has been spoiled by the time I'm doing this video, but I think it's a very, very cool ability word. Leaves a lot of room for development in the future. I wonder if all of the things that are going to be changing into bigger things are going to start quite as small as the little girl. Hopefully we see some with some actual stats. Obviously, if you do attach an item to the little girl for some reason, obviously if it lives for a turn, it'll be changing. So if you attach an immediate item to the little girl, you can get an Ageless Vampire. You could always little girl and Enchanted Plate on the same turn if you have more Magicka. I've been talking about playing it on curve up to this point, but if you play it later in the game, you could little girl, Enchanted Plate to play around a card like Firebolt. Then all of a sudden you have a 5/8 Ageless Vampire coming out on the following turn. So that could be good as well. There's definitely some cool implications with change. Hopefully we see more of that in the future. So that's my card. Well, I guess card and a half technically, since it creates another card. I got, bonus, I guess. Feel free to leave a comment if you've liked the reveal, if you've liked the card, what your thoughts on the playability are. I'm looking forward to reading all of those. If you think there's a deck it goes in, if you think I've overrated, if you think I've underrated the card, just let me know. Join the conversation in the comments. Feel free to leave a like. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for more card analysis. I'll be posting my fourth first impressions video for the Fall of the Dark Brotherhood tomorrow. I've been doing those on all the revealed cards, so I'll be talking about a lot of the other cards that have been revealed, so stay tuned for that tomorrow. Other strategy content, as always, feel free to follow the stream down below for some daily Legends streams, and I will see you guys next time.